What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. And we are, on this journey through NFTs. One of the beautiful things that I know many of you talk to me about a lot is like that you get to come on the journey with me in many ways, right? You get to see the highs, the lows. My wallet gets compromised. I start traveling. I recorded podcasts in hotels and airport lounges. But also one of the things that, probably gives me the most excitement is when it comes into conference event time, which is something that I've been very blessed is like my bread and butter, my full-time job being speaking on stages, and a lot of that kicks off kind of the March timeframe until usually summer. They let us off in July, and then it kind of kicks back up in the fall, for a lot of events. And events in the Web3 space, hot and heavy, right? And most people know, this podcast, it was the origin from what I would refer to as the first NFT NYC. I know there was ones before it, but most people, when we think about NFT NYC, we think about the 2021 fall NFT NYC after the Beeple sell, after Bored Ape, the very first, Yuga, the Ape Fest NFT event. And for me, that is such a big component of this. Is like putting faces to names, moving things offline. But as most of you also know, one of my big things with NFTs is not only understanding like value, but we need to prove these use cases in scenarios that aren't just digital communities inside of a Discord or aren't just Twitter chats on Twitter Spaces. And so excited to have that conversation. We're going to dive in a little bit on that side of it today with our guest Sam. Sam, thanks so much for joining us today here on the podcast. Let the audience know a little bit about your background, and then we'll get us some fun conversation, talk events, talk a lot of news. We'll go down that path.
That sounds great. My name is Sam Ewen. I spent about 15 years in the experiential marketing business. Had my own agency that we built large-scale events, small events, publicity stunts, things that got us in trouble. Sold that agency in 2014, and actually been pretty much in the media world since. Was hired by a couple of different publishers, including the New York Times, and now I'm with Coindesk. I've been at Coindesk now about a year and a half, helping to sort of head up a lot of their custom content experience and Web3 initiatives. So that's been a really exciting opportunity. And like you, we've done the event circuit all over the world. And I'm really excited to have the conversation.
Well, I love that. Excited to bring you in this conversation. I haven't had anybody from your world in here yet, so excited to have you on. And we've referenced Coindesk in many cases, of course, throughout the 400 plus episodes of the podcast. Also love kind of the support of Web3 creators, female creators. I don't think there's enough media that is kind of making that a staple, and I like to see that as part of that narrative. And so I'm curious, just from the jump, just from a standpoint of for those that aren't familiar with Coindesk and kind of how they kind of represent in this space, can you give us a little bit kind of like what is the breadth that Coindesk kind of provides? Like what are the things that they kind of operate as far as not only media side, but as far as like even events and products, services, that side?
Yeah, for sure. Coindesk is we're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary in April. So one of the oldest and I believe still the largest crypto publication, really focused on covering the sort of breadth and width of the industry. Been around for a lot of the big moments also. We were kind of part of the team that broke the Mt. Gox hack story in 2014 and the Ethereum launch in 2015. We most recently are, quite well known for really breaking the story that brought down FTX. So our whole goal is bringing kind of truth to the crypto industry. We are very bullish on the industry itself, but we are, willing to sort of call out and give opportunity to the folks who are building in the space. We also, alongside that, we're in our 9th year of Consensus. Consensus is the largest sort of big tent crypto festival. So unlike an NFT NYC, unlike an ETH Denver, which is happening now, which are all kind of siloed to the specific types of protocols or verticals, we cover the whole industry. So if you come to Consensus, you're going to get as much Web3 as you are going to get regulation, as you're going to get metaverse, as you're going to get institutional finance, investment. A lot of developers come. And last year we had about 20,000 people. So it's definitely a pretty big event in Austin, Texas. We'll be back there again, April 26th through 28th. And my excitement about it is, and like you, I've been to a lot of these festivals. I always think that, having really interesting and introspective speakers on stage who you can network with, who you can get insight from, is what makes a conference. And, we've had everyone from Jack Dorsey to Vitalik, to various senators and people building the future of the industry that we're in. And, that's what we try to bring every year, is just a place for people to both get inspired, network, ideally get invested in or invest in others, and really just vibe with each other and understand who are the people who are actually building this industry.
Yeah, I love that. I always say, Consensus for me was always like it's a multi-hyphenate dream. Like for me, I could love, tap a little bit of everything. It's also like my favorite events to follow on Twitter, for even when I'm not attending, because it does hit a lot of, very variable, kind of topics. And so you're not just kind of stuck in one. I did kind of laugh a little bit because quality of content on stages, not really the NFT events bread and butter, would be truthful. And I say that even as speaker that spoke at a lot of these events. I think it's unfortunate, it's like everything. I mean, South by Southwest, I was there in 2008, 2009. We know that the content was not what people were showing up there for on stage, right? I think a lot of that kind of evolves, but Consensus has kind of been known for not only that like breadth of great content on stages, but also kind of bringing some of those like hard hitting panels or fireside chats, which I think are always great. The unfortunate thing for me was I spoke at a couple events like for 4 or 5 years in a row that were always the same week as Consensus. So I remember being like the guy that was always in in either Vegas or LA at other events. You did mention like the idea, like kind of breaking stories. I mean, Mount God, I think Mount was probably the first. That was probably the first time I had ever like kind of heard of that. And I remember even sharing articles and kind of being because I was so plugged into the blockchain side of the world. And then of course with the FTX thing, I'm curious just from and I will tap in a little bit more on Consensus, but like as someone that's a brand that's been covering the space, as an event that has like the space, there's also just like big media that I'll say it so you don't have to, is like they prefer to take the cliff notes of whatever they can for the most part and turn that into a spin that kind of keeps those that are afraid of change, or those that are kind of wanting to prevent. They like, I don't want to adopt this if I don't have to. But I'm curious just from like your experience being on this side, but also someone that kind of has sat on the experiential side of the house. How do you see like the current momentum leading in? Because we had Proof Conference, of course, kind of to make a big decision, and the Moonbirds announcement that just happened. And I thought it was really unfortunate that a couple of smaller events I saw they took down their websites, and I was like, hold on a second, like let's not let just one event kind of be the catalyst. But what is your kind of sense or pulse, like where we're at now as far as not only media, but kind of like momentum into kind of event season?
It's a great question. I think there are anchor events, and then there are sort of supporting events. And, South by is never going away. It's a great business model. It also, to your point, even if you go to the conference or don't go to the conference, you're going to meet some amazing people. You're going to have some great times. Yes. Same as can be said with CES. Same can be said with Cannes if you're in the ad business. Yep. There are a couple anchor moments like that. I believe we're that for the crypto industry. But I do think that it's actually really much harder than people think to throw a great event. And it's more costly than people think. And I think part of it is, when you build an event, I always think from like the user, like almost what's the UX of the attendee experience. Yeah. And it's hard to make that really substantive. So I think that with like a Kevin Rose and Moonbirds, I think they had all the great intention with Proof to have an amazing conference. I think that Kevin has the access to probably throw an amazing conference. Yeah. But I think that it's a business model, frankly, which is very hard. And, and I often applaud, kind of like Gary Vee and VCon, because they've, they put on a great first event. They're, obviously very committed to their second event in a much tougher year than it was last year. But I think they're even evolving that event. If you look at the speakers, that, it's not all Web3 anymore. It's kind of like general business information. It's people who are more cultural like leaders. And I think that there is room for a bunch of those, but I do think there are only so many. And so you mentioned NFT NYC, for example, that they're 2 weeks before us. That event in 2021 and 2022 was actually super fun, but it was really super fun for everything not the conference.
Without question.
without
And I have a lot of friends like you who are speaking on panels. A lot of them walked into empty rooms. A lot of them, like the organizers, never actually told them where to go. And so it turned that it felt the conference was really a vehicle for other things to happen. They also had 1,300 speakers. Whether people were paying to play, I don't know. But the fact is, that's just too much, right?
Yep.
So I think part of what we should expect as an industry is that if you're going to spend the money to travel to a location, to hang out with your friends, to learn, that the folks who are throwing the conference themselves should respect your time enough to understand what's going to make this substantive for you. And that is something I think a lot of people love the idea of throwing a big party, but they don't want to do the work.
And let's face it, I think every event model has always been like lose a lot of money, lose a little bit less of a lot of money, lose a little of money, right? It's a model that, let's face it, in a very unforgiving NFT world. I went to VCon as a longtime Gary Vee fan, met Gary and he took me under his wing in 2014 originally, and was a fan. I went to VCon not expecting much, truthfully, and I remember that first night and we were all outside and I was like, what? Massive respect. I did not expect it to be what it became, but you're right. It's evolved. I will also say, shout out to Jody and the NFT NYC team for what they did in London. I will tell you, NFT London, I found myself running between panels, which that was actually impressive. And, it helped. It was all in one venue. I also feel like the audience there was really just richly involved, wanting to be there, right? Versus the party side of the house, I think. And I think there's always space for both of them. I remember I always used to leave, I left South by Southwest and would always fly to Social Media Marketing World, back to back. And I would always laugh, and then I would go to Adobe. So those were my 3 in a row. You could have got 3 more different environments, but those were also big spaces, right? And I think, like you mentioned, with Consensus having a kind of a different feel, as soon as Gary Vee announced the speakers, I think my very first tweet was, wow, this is a shift, because he wants VaynerMedia and Vayner Enterprises to care versus just a bunch of VFriend holders, which, hey, that whatever kind of floats there. But the other side of this is the ticketing, the experience side, right? And I think, unfortunately, Gary, they did an amazing job at VCon, but he controlled variables, right? You can only come in one door.
Yep.
It is a giant stadium. There's one entrance, and you can't go in and come out. He made sure so that the token, side of it, because for those that weren't there in 2021 at NFT NYC, every event was token gated. I don't believe any event's token gating worked in that first event. The amount of things that they scanned, and I'd be like, can I just pull open my MetaMask and show you that the NFT is in there? But I feel like it's evolving, but there's also this weird separation, right? From what we would consider the traditional QR scanning, brick and mortar, even the point of sale systems, the POS systems. And I will say, I've had Starbucks team on the most recent episode with, Joe talking about that. And I'm still amazed. I buy a Starbucks and my Starbucks Odyssey account is updated by the time I get home. And that just is amazing. What's your take on that space, right? Conference, Web3 connections, blockchain doesn't make a lot of these things super easy, let alone we're connecting on Wi-Fi signals. Sometimes we're underground in a venue. But what's your take on kind of the tech emerging, supporting a lot of these offline event experiences?
Something I've been talking about a lot recently. So there's 2 things I want to bring up. One is I think the live event access, both in a Web 2 world and a Web 3 world, is somewhat broken, right? So Web 2, this is the example I've been giving recently, is if you look at Disney, right? Disney last year, their parks and experiences group, 72% higher profits, right? One can sort of look at that as COVID, but honestly, the parks have been open a year and a half. Yeah. So what's happening there when you break that down? Well, Disney has this amazing model where everyone wants to go. They bring their kids, they bring their families. They let too many people in the park, right? So they charge too much money, let everybody in. Then suddenly it's like, oh, I want to go on Magic Mountain. It's a 3-hour wait. And then they're like, oh, you could pay extra. Here's our dash lane. And that skips the line, right? So they're in essence charging you to solve a problem that they have created. Yep. And they're doing it at a massive profit. And Ticketmaster is very similar. To Monopoly, they can charge what they want. They gate access. They run both the resale market and they run the primary market. And average fees there are 28%. It's a tremendous amount of money going towards them. We run an event, we make no mistake, our tickets are not cheap. It's people are there to meet each other, network, connect. Hopefully you can make back more than you spend by coming. But we actually looked at that, and we actually decided this is the first year we're doing something. We released a project which is called Microcosms. This is a NFT based project that's really an experiment for us, right? And the idea is, instead of, if I buy a ticket right now, a pro ticket today costs me $2,000 roughly to come to our conference. Again, B2B, right? But for 1.5 ETH, I can buy one of our Microcosms project. It's an NFT by an amazing generative artist. We work with Art Blocks on this. And that gets you access for the next 3 years to the same tier ticket, right? So you can invest a little bit of money on the upfront to say my next 3 years are covered at a much discounted rate. And then what we did for the attendee experience, a lot of people come, for example, to Consensus because they have a startup, they want to get funded, right? So we created this reward system, which is all randomized, it's all algorithmic, very much like generative art, where someone's going to win the opportunity to speak on stage on a topic. Someone's going to win a booth on the show floor, which right now is $19,000. Someone's going to win a media buy on Coindesk. Someone else is going to win an hour-long meeting with VCs, right? So the idea is all those folks are looking to come and get funded, get attention, build their name. What happens if we can actually build that as a reward system? And so we released this project, the Consensus NFT. It's coindesk.com/Consensus NFT. But really what it is it's this suite of digital assets. We use token proof. So that's how we're managing the token gating. We work with Art Blocks on the generative side, an amazing company called Passage Protocol, which we did a lot of really complex tokenomics on the airdrops. And, and the other thing, which is actually really cool, is if, let's say I win the booth and I don't have a company to show at a booth, right? That booth is a $19,000 asset right now. Like, I could come in and a friend could have a startup and could say, hey, what if I offer you 2 ETH for that? And buy the NFT of the booth from you. So everything is an addition, like an additive reward. And my whole premise, my whole thesis is, what if events were additive in value to the most loyal fans instead of extractive in value from the most loyal fans? Because that's sort of the way that the classic ticketing industry works today.
And let's face it, I think so much of that has been broken across every space, right? Like my family's had season tickets for the Steelers since 1969. And we play by the same rules for paying for playoffs, for how much a drink costs, right? And a lot of that comes from this place of privilege. And in Pittsburgh, it's a 16-year waiting list. My dad put me on the list when I was 5. Like, I remember, very spoiled in Pittsburgh sports, but that model is very kind of rampant across the board. So, and I love that, right? Because part of this relationship, customer loyalty, ownership, celebrate requires ownership of some kind of asset that has a marketplace, right? It's cool that we could have done this in Web 2, but you wouldn't have known how to sell it or resell it. You would have been and a lot of it would almost go waste or not be able to kind of foresee the reward. And I know for our audience, our very first sponsor of the podcast was the Creator Expo, CEX, put on by Joe Polizzi and Content Marketing Institute. And that's what they implemented, a 3-year ticket out of the jump, which I know many of our listeners jumped onto that. I spoke there the first year. I'm keynoting again this year at that event. But I will say the part that Joe and Joe is a dear friend and someone that I've worked with for a long while. He also talked a lot about that bridge from how hard is it to buy the ticket, right? So I'm curious from that part, from the Consensus approach. I love, Art Blocks being involved, the protocol you're using, token proof, all of these things are let's just say the best of the best in their, respective spaces. There also has to be the group of Web 2ers that are I don't have a wallet. How the hell am I buying a ticket? How did you guys kind of approach that or assess the non-natives to also kind of buy tickets and be part of this?
Yeah, for sure. And to be frank, I think, if we had 6 more months to build, I think we probably would have built some credit card rails in. But right now with our partners, and to your point, we went really to the best in each category. They weren't supporting credit card purchase right now. So I think we just willingly said, hey, we're going to give up some opportunity here for that reason. But similarly, we were actually talking with our finance group the other day about, if someone we're basically saying to anyone, if you buy one of our Microcosm passes right now and you need a proof of transaction and a receipt for your expenses, we can give that to you because it's all on chain, it's all transparent, right? So as long as you can verify it's your wallet, I can tell you exactly what you paid at that moment. And so it's not ideal for the B2B crowd. And I think this is something that is still a big pain point. I would love for people to open wallets. If you're coming to Consensus, you should have a wallet. But I also know a lot of folks have their companies pay for tickets. And so, part of it is being willing to experiment. We might sell 10 tickets, we might sell 100 tickets. Like, we just don't know right now. And I think we're okay with that. But we do think that for the ones who get in and understand, it's an amazing value, it's an amazing opportunity. And the fact that over a 3-year period, we can think about how to reward people. One of the things I was talking about earlier was every year. So the traits that we have 350 traits if we did a full mint out that are going to be airdropped to people. Every single year for the IRL traits, we're going to re-roll, right? So you might have the most common NFT right now from the generative side, but you might get the most valuable thing this year. Or if you didn't, maybe next year you get the most valuable thing. But also then when we have a community, we can say, what are the things that would be valuable for you? Is it a meet and greet with someone? Is there a private session that we can create with the speaker? Is there the opportunity for you to show up on digital signage, to be part of someone on a Spaces earlier suggested, what if you held the NFT and you could actually put your art on the big screens in between sessions? I was like, all of these things are amazing. And like, we can actually work with the community to bring these things to life because we run the conference. So it's kind of an interesting way to think about it.
I love that. And I would say, like, we're doing, I'm teaming up with a couple other NFT projects to put on an event, an NFT NYC. And that was the idea I came up with, was like, any of our partner projects that are going to come in as partners, they're going to get like lanyards for their members, right? So that you can see who holds what NFTs, right? It's another problem we have digitally, right? Like, we've all done that. We come to an event and you're like, we're connected on Twitter, but we don't really know, and it's even worse in this space. But then we also were like, well, we're going to allow, if your project's there, to have certain screens so that like project could put their PFPs on the screens. And even if they had a musician they wanted to connect, right? Like, I think that is a big piece of this pie. And I will also say, like, I mean, when VCon announced, for context too, one of the things Gary said was, my team knows that they're going to have to handhold, jump on Zooms individually with people to get these tickets. And part of it is like, there is a little bit of like a wallet creation isn't that hard these days, right? Like, protecting your wallet and security, we can't understate or undervalue that. But I mean, the basics of creating a wallet, token proof. I actually used token proof today for the event I was speaking at earlier, just before this episode. They're gated theirs through token proof, right? So it's a virtual event. And it was easy as, I mean, I literally scanned the QR code with my phone, and I was connected to my wallet. It verified I had the NFT in there. And I love that, kind of simplicity. I also love the Art Blocks, collab. I mean, Art Blocks is, definitely an OG of really supporting artists in the space. I'm curious too, from like you mentioned, the predictability of sales is hard, right? But also predictability of what the use cases are. And I think this is where most go wrong, in the sense of the beauty of NFTs, especially from a utility perspective, is you can always add on, right? You can always kind of increase that value to reward, those super fans, those pieces. I'm curious, from from last year's event or last couple of years events, was there a certain, demographics, the probably wrong way to put it, but was there a certain subsection, since you guys kind of cover the whole thing, we feel like, because it's an NFT, Art Blocks having that piece, I'm guessing the crypto native crowd, they've had wallets a lot longer, crypto been around a lot longer, but I wonder how many people this might be their first NFT, but they've had a wallet for 7 years. How did you guys, were you able to kind of assess a little bit on that side? I'm just curious on that side.
No, it's a fantastic question. So, roughly speaking, there's about 2.5 million wallets that have interacted with NFTs in any substantive way. I think Coinbase alone has 80 or 90 million wallets. Right. There's a giant delta between people who have experienced NFTs and people who are playing crypto. And that's just Coinbase, right? You add Binance, you add Kraken, you add others, and suddenly you're going to have 200 million wallets that have never interacted. So part of, our audience is a little bit more crypto than it is Web3, although that's changing very quickly. And so, to your point, we did want to encourage people that maybe, even if you were a suspect of NFTs, this is an opportunity for you to try it in a kind of safe way, right? You already know you're getting 3 years of tickets. You already know you're saving $1,500 just by doing that. And then you also get this art asset on top. You also get all the benefits of additional rewards. And we're hoping it gets, I would prefer if, 60% of the people who bought it were people who were crypto native and very bullish on crypto, but hadn't yet understood. Maybe they were skeptical of the NFT ecosystem. The NFT folks, I think I can hold something, I can get rewarded. And I want, and of course we're trying to satisfy them too. But really, I think it is an opportunity for for the non-NFT native to get involved into the system. The other thing I think is interesting, which you said, is, look, we run a traditional event. Someone wants to buy a ticket with a credit card, they can. So like we don't want a barrier being you have to get the NFT. So unlike maybe a VCon where you had to have that, for us, our event is part of our business model. So we really want to make sure that there's access. But I love what you said earlier, because you're throwing an event in NFT NYC. The fact that I can read that's on chain and I can say, you know what if you came to Consensus with an NFT and went to Fanzo's event, and then together that got you even an additional bonus, right? The fact that all that's transparent. Someone said this yesterday, which it was Ty Haney, who started Outdoor Voices. She has a loyalty company called TYB, all in the Web3 space. And she said this to me, it was an amazing unlock. But she said, the interoperability question when it comes to NFTs should not be looked at in terms of interoperability of whether or not my NFT can be used in Decentraland or the Sandbox. It should be looked at interoperability between communities. And that actually, to me, is such an interesting unlock, that by knowing the community overlap points, you can then reward them and incentivize them to come in ways that is additive to all parties, which I think is like a fantastic way to think.
Yeah, it was funny. I was telling the Starbucks team on that interview, I said, if I was Marriott right now, I would just airdrop everyone that has a Starbucks NFT in their wallet. Just put it in their wallet and be like, Marriott's working on something, like, because you already know that Starbucks found like that beta user that is there, that that is valuing the Starbucks side. And I think that's such an important component. Like I feel like collaboration in this space is talked about like almost outside of the container that it probably should be, because your point is really spot on. And also, like, right now, I've been to South by Southwest forever. A lot of these big events, you're in Austin, which is one of my favorite cities in the world to have events, but like also just like that idea of like not only unlocking different experiences, but the building on, right? If you support our sponsors and go to these three things, which is what we know the sponsors want, right? Like, and before it was like a bingo card or some nonsense that was like, but it was the only way to track, right? Like we have to, give credit where credit was due in Web 2. In Web 3, the idea that like I can collect a POAP or an NFT at these things along the way, or even like if you attend 5 webinars this year, when you go to the website to buy our ticket, this is the discount, and that there's no management on the back end, right? It's all on the blockchain. And so I think like those are things that I think hopefully we continue to unlock. It's why I love the way that you're doing the NFT. I also love Art Block's collaboration, right? Because I think it's easy to kind of to want to do a lot of these things, but then kind of to do it without having it kind of like also Web3 native components. I am curious, like from a standpoint of generative artists, right? I there's a lot of great content. We'll make sure the link is there for those in the show notes. From a standpoint of like the reward mechanism and like that combined to like the marketplace world that we how does that kind of show up? How do people know what they're being rewarded with, or like what is that kind of process? I think that's very disconnected, I think, in most experiences today.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on this actually. And so, if you buy an NFT today and you go to OpenSea, you'll see a grid of traits, right? That the artist sets. And our Fahad Karim, who's an amazing generative artist, who's an Art Blocks artist as well, we worked with him. And so there'll be a bunch of traits. One of those traits, for example, is a specific color palette, which is called our metaverse palette, that if you have that, it actually gives you access to get an infinite objects, a physical device screen,
a big fan of infinite objects.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So basically, so we did build a couple of the reward traits into the art traits themselves. If you have this palette, you get this thing for free. If we have 5 of the people who mint will get a Genesis ticket, for a forever ticket. That will be a trait you get on the art side. In working with the other team, Passage, who has been fantastic, we then can update the metadata. So in essence, you'll go today, you'll see your mint, it'll have art traits on it, if you will. And then we do a snapshot on the 15th of March. 16th of March, we then airdrop to everybody a whole additional set of IRL traits.
Oh, wow.
So the idea is the IRL traits will show up on your object, but, and I think that this is important to your point. So let's just say, I won a signed copy of Fahad's work and I won a free hotel stay comp, right?
Right.
Those will show up not only in your traits on your artwork, but it has 2 additional NFTs in your wallet.
Nice.
Right. And the reason is, again, let's just say you have an issue come up, you can't get to Austin, but someone else can say, oh, right now hotels are $2,000. What if I offer, $1,000 on the comp? Then someone can literally sell that, offsets your price, and then suddenly, it gives the opportunity for someone else to get in a little bit cheaper. So every single trait on the ground is an additional NFT that you can trade. And so that was part of the way we thought about it. We also will have with Token Proof, we'll have a site you can go to and check to say my NFT has these traits with it, and you can redeem most of them there as well. So it has been months of building that back end. I'm really proud of the team and what they've executed, because I do think we had to think through a lot of very complex situations, but hopefully laying a little bit more of a roadmap as we continue to move forward.
No, I mean, that's why I asked, right? Because I think it is like, oftentimes like when I first thought about fractionalizing of NFT, that's where my mind went, was like, I always said, like, choose your own adventure on how you use your utility. And if those are utility pieces that you don't want to use, but you still want to be a part of the community, or maybe I want to go next year, right? Like being able to have some of these like subsections. So I love that thought process. And I also think for everybody listening, right? Like until there's events willing to test these mechanics, we don't know what works, what doesn't work, right? We don't know the vehicles of a lot of these things. Cause like, I mean, it's so interesting that we can sit often from like, well, in Web 2, we did it this way. In Web 3, we did it this. Like, I think there's a lot of this has to be like implemented and tested. And, even like, I mean, I like proximity tagging for a lot of things, right? But, even proximity tagging, depending on the venue, depending on what devices someone has, iPhone versus Samsung versus, do they connect to Wi-Fi? Not, like there's so many variables that are at play there. So I'm excited to see that. We'll put the notes there as well. I am curious from a standpoint of, is there a topic or a, like if you were thinking about it from like a media, like, hey, coming out of Consensus, this will be kind of the buzz. Is there something that you think is going to be like kind of the pulse either at this moment? I know it's kind of hard. I mean, this space changes. We don't know what the pulse is going to be in a week, but like, is there something that you kind of see kind of like grumbling underneath that could be a Consensus kind of takeaway at the end?
Yeah, actually, this year we are doing the first ever, what we're calling the Consensus report, which will be looking at, our prediction is somewhere between 10 and 12 topics, and we'll be doing kind of high level sort of takes on what's going to happen. Part of the reason we're doing that is that each year we can look back and say, did we get it right or get it wrong? There's 4 areas that I think are really interesting that I'm paying attention to in terms of this, to your question. The first is, I think there will be a lot, the last Consensus was June of 2022. We were at Consensus when 3 Arrows Capital started to go down.
Oh, wow.
Right. A couple of weeks later was Voyager. Then, we actually, we're part of the FTX, breaking that story later.
Yeah, so, that was the last week of my 1 year, by the way. Just I was like talking about a weird way for me to end 1 year, 365 days was the Monday of our final week. FTX broke.
Oh yeah, so and so I think there will be a lot of conversation about that, and I think it's not specifically about what went wrong on the FTX side. I mean, we'll definitely talk about that. We have some amazing folks coming to big stages who are insider and had some stuff to talk about. But I think in general, FTX was not only just a failure of centralized crypto, it was also a failure of Silicon Valley, right? The amount of money they threw at FTX without doing the due diligence. It was also a failure of the media, right? The media who sort of like propped this guy up.
For sure.
And so I think that some self-analysis as a community is going to be really important. So I think just, how do we move on from that? I kind of look at it a little bit more proof of humanity, right? Let's be a little bit better to each other in the stuff we're building. Number 2 is consumer Web3. So we have, I mean, you mentioned Joe and the Forum 3 team who are building Starbucks. We have Andy from Forum 3 coming.
Yeah, Andy's coming. Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. We have, we have Mark from Salesforce. We have Kate from PepsiCo. We have some of the biggest companies, Angelique from Allo, Wanda from Warner Music. Like we have amazing brands coming to talk about really the technological innovation, right? They're all much less interested in the financial speculation, but they're like, ownership is an unlock. And if we can figure that out, it's big. So I think consumer Web3 will be another big one. Third, I think is the bit of the transition from metaverse to Web3 gaming as a hotter topic, right? The big MetaMask launch this week was incredible, right?
We just covered that news on the last
episode. Exactly. So so to me, that's we're beginning to, I think, break down the sort of cool walls that were there between gaming and NFTs. And then the final piece, I think, is just all the government regulation. Like, it's been a crazy couple of months. And we're, I mean, even Silvergate this week and what's going on the banking side is all really scary. And so I think, we have a bunch of politicians and a bunch of regulation people coming to really help decipher what it means for long-term for this industry, right? I mean, I don't think there's any way this industry goes away. I think there are a lot of forces that are trying to keep it down, and primarily because they're protecting a lot of revenue from very traditional financial institutions, but often at the expense of consumers. And so I think having that conversation and a real honest one, both between the crypto industry and the political machine, is going to be really important. So those are the 4 areas I'm interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I like all 4 of that. I definitely the consumer side, that brand onboarding, that part really excites me. I also saw Snowden is on that list, which is
he's always a great speaker.
I have a weird, like, I was working for the U.S. government in cybersecurity post Snowden days, and so like a lot of my team, we were deployed to the Pentagon, and funny enough, I had that experience, and then I also had the leaving the government experience and relating in the other side. And I've actually shared the stage with Snowden at an international event, and I had, it was really interesting, just the conversation that can happen there, and also excited, like, like you mentioned, like the brand mix, I like the mix of, like, it's media that's in the know in this space, but also, conversations a little bit bigger than that. So yeah, I mean, great stuff coming. Excited to see how all that kind of plays out. I definitely have to give a shout out to the podcast, Women Who Web3, which is Camila's podcast.
Yep.
I was celebrating, I think we talked about here on the podcast, whenever it was announced that you guys kind of collaborated and brought that podcast to life. I love what she talks about. I love her mission, as a girl dad as well. It's like, just like a connection there. And so, full circle, I think there's something beautiful about the space as we start to move, some of these needles forward. And I think for, our listeners, those 4 topics that you talked about, right, with the fact that also pushing forward a lot of the technology and some of these experiences, I mean, this is what should all excite all of us to kind of amplify and be a part of. The day-to-day that sometimes we get stuck in on Twitter Spaces is the day-to-day of Twitter Spaces. Like, it's important to kind of macro out and see. So, exciting stuff. Anything we missed or anything we want to throw in there before we wrap up?
No, I mean, one, I just want to, I think the media approach to decentralization, which you are a part of, I just want to give props back. I think that, there's some people who are doing really great work in helping to push kind of what it means to have a decentralized media ecosystem, which is so important for all of us to have. So one, just like props to you and this community. I know how vibrant it is. We'd love to see folks to come to Consensus. We'll be doing a bunch of giveaways. We have scholarship programs. Like, we want to make sure people can get there regardless, because it is such a substantive event. And so, always, you can always hit me up on Twitter. You can reach out to our teams. We have a lot of stuff and opportunities for folks. And yeah, I mean, if anyone is interested on the kind of thinking through the ticketing side of it, Coindesk.com/consensus NFTs, where you can just read about it. We understand it's a pricey purchase, so like, we don't expect everyone's going to do it, but there's a lot of value there for the right kind of person. So check it out. And yeah, we just appreciate you having us on.
Of course, yeah, and I always like to caveat that too when we think about pricey things, right? Like, it's definitely a experiences, on offline experiences, if you break it down from but we think about it from like the bigger context of unlock and networking, and I really try to stress, for me, I'm very blessed, like events being my life, like that's where, but for so many that I know that want to capitalize on certain experiences, and they're going to go degen into 5 or 6 projects, or they're going to buy the 9th Moonbird that they need. Like, maybe the 8 are good, and you can go to an event and pocket that, right? Not financial advice, but just kind of putting that out there for everybody to kind of think about it and kind of level set on. And I appreciate the kind words, and I'll also say, just for our listeners as well, right? I think check out the website I thought the messaging, kudos to the team, right? The messaging, the video, I like the kind of breakdown, of not only why you're doing it, but how it's being implemented. Also, there's a really nice, like, little graph on like what the rewards are. Lessons for every project out there, right? On like, NFTs are already confusing enough for so many, but like, being able to, like, you could literally walk through and see what is the tech, why they chose art blocks, what are the things that make sense. And I think that just like that template and boilerplate is something this entire space could use. So Sam, thanks so much for jumping on, and look forward to everything Consensus and all those kind of innovations as we push forward. So,
I appreciate you.
Yep. For everybody listening, as always, today's a great day to show you care, right? The bar for caring is pretty low in the digital space as a whole. And I like to believe that if we all, just each one of us individually, just reach out to one person today, let them know we care, let them know we appreciate them. It could be a content creator, an artist, they could be just a supporter, a fan, a friend. Just let one person know that you care about them today. And I can promise that we'll make the world a better place. We'll make people special. And I mean, that's the least we could do in this day and age. So until next time, my friends, make it a great day. Cheers.